Welcome on this course page of this Vue.js course. It's so great to have you here. My name is Maximilian Schwarzmüller and I'm a freelance web developer and online instructor here on Udemy. I have multiple 5-star rated courses, but I'm especially proud about this course. This course is about Vue.js, one of the most popular front-end frameworks you can find as of today. Front-end frameworks in general are very popular because they allow us to create applications which bring this very reactive user experience from our mobile phones, from our apps, to the browser, no matter if you're then viewing it on a mobile phone or the desktop. Therefore, these frameworks are very important today, and Vue.js happens to be one of the most popular amongst them. It combines the best of the Angular 2 and React.js world if you know these frameworks, and overall, knowing a framework like Vue.js really gives you an edge on the job markets because people knowing frameworks like these are in very high demand as of now. In this course, we will start at the very basics. What is Vue.js? How does it work? And how is the base syntax working? And then we will move through all the concepts Vue.js offers you. We'll have a look at components, filters, directives, animations, and then we move up all the way to building enterprise-level applications with routing, a better state management, and in the end, of course, you also learn how to deploy your application. Throughout this course, I will have a lot of exercises which allow you to train the concepts you learned, and you will also have multiple projects which we're building together so that you see the things that you learn in this course in action right away. I'd be very happy if you would join me on this journey through the world of Vue.js and if I could welcome you on this course. Welcome to this course. I'm really happy to have you here because Vue.js is an amazing, powerful, and really fun to work with front-end framework. Let's get started right away and dive into the first important question. What is Vue.js, or why would you want to use it? How does it help you? Well, Vue.js allows you to create everything from small widgets driven by JavaScript, which you drop into existing applications, like this one, which we'll create in this course, where we simply replace some content dynamically and play a nice animation with it, over medium-sized applications, where you control the whole page through JavaScript and therefore re-render various parts, making it very reactive, like this one, another course project, all the way up to building big enterprise-level applications, single-page applications, where your whole web page, multiple pages, at least it feels like this to the user, are driven by Vue.js, which renders significant parts of the DOMs to make it look like there were different pages being loaded, but in the end, JavaScript handling all of that. Why JavaScript? Because JavaScript runs in the browser. You don't need to reach out to any server. You don't need to wait for any responses if you only want to re-render parts of the application. This makes the application very reactive. It makes it feel nice, and it provides awesome user experiences. Now, that is what you can do with Vue.js. Now, why would you choose Vue.js and not, let's say, Angular 2 or React.js, which you might know, which do a similar thing? Well, first of all, Vue.js is extremely lean and small regarding the file size. We're talking about 16 kilobytes minified and gzipped for the core framework. Now, I will say that is without the router, for example, which you would have to add extra, but even with that, it still stays very lean and small. It's a very focused and to-the-point framework. But it's not only small, hence providing a fast loading time, it also is fast at runtime, and telling by some benchmarks, it even beats Angular 2 and React.js. Now, of course, that will always depend on your specific application, but what we can say is it is extremely fast at runtime, hence really again adding to this very great reactive user experience. Now, you would probably assume that a small and fast framework doesn't have that many features, but you would be wrong. It's very feature rich, and throughout the course, we will go through all the features and you will learn how they work, how you use them, when you use them, what the idea behind them is. You will learn that Vue.js is very extendable, for example, with the extra router, but then this extension then also fits nicely into the core framework. And again, we will walk through all these great features throughout this course. Now, with that first impression, I'd say let's dive right into it and get started with Vue.js and build our first little application, as well as see how we actually get set up. Spoiler, it's very easy to do. Let's do it in the next lecture. Getting started with Vue.js and creating your first application is actually very simple. We start on Vue.js.org, its official homepage, and there you see this nice Get Started button. Let's click on it. It takes you to the official documentation, which is always worth having a look anyways, but there we want to go to Installation. Now here you got a couple of different options depending on which kind of setup you want to use. Later in this course we will use a more complex setup using Webpack to bundle all our files, but let's start with a simple one. You could either simply download Vue.js, I will show this in a later video, or, as I want to do now, simply grab it from a CDN, so import it from another server. Here I'll take the first one and then simply copy this whole link. Now with that we can import this link to get access to Vue.js. Well, I want to do this here on JSFiddle, which is kind of a web editor you could say for very simple JavaScript, HTML and CSS only projects. Here we got our HTML section in which we should add a script import. So let's add script, and then by hitting tab it will automatically expand it to script tags. There I want to add my source attribute and now insert the link you just copied. Now you can leave the link like this, or you can remove this version number to always automatically fetch the latest version. With that we imported Vue.js and we can now already use it and all its features. So let's use it and build our first little application. For that I want to add a paragraph in which I want to say hello world. Now saying it like this clearly is not very interesting. There is no JavaScript involved at any place. Instead I want to output this through Vue.js. Now in order to do so, I will simply go to the JavaScript section here and use the import up there to now use one of the major objects this import, this Vue.js framework gives me, the Vue object. Let's create a new instance based on that with the new keyword and then Vue. This gives us a new Vue instance, and Vue instances created like this are the core of each Vue application, of each piece of code you want to use Vue.js in. You create such instances and then these instances have one major job: control their own template of code, of HTML code, which they render to the screen. Now in order to let this Vue instance do this, we have to pass an argument to this constructor function. The argument is a JavaScript object, and there we have one very important property Vue.js will recognize: the L property. This is kind of a reserved property, obviously, Vue.js will recognize it. And L takes a string as a value, and with this string we set up which part of our HTML code here should be under control of this Vue instance. And with under control, I mean we can then change it through this Vue instance. You will see this in a few seconds. So here I want to control this part, but I want to wrap it in a div, let's say a div which encloses my template for this Vue instance. So here I'll add a div and then hashtag app and then tab automatically gives me a div with the ID app. Now I'll insert my paragraph inside of this div, and then I can select this div with the ID app by using the string like a CSS selector. So with hashtag app, I select the element with the ID app. With dot app, I would select the first element with a class of app. Now here, I therefore have now control of this div. It is now the template of this Vue instance. And now in order to output something, we need some data. Well, Vue.js got a special property for this, the data property, another reserved property. And now this isn't a string, it's an object instead. And in there we store all the data we want to use in this Vue instance. So let's say we want to have a title, and this name is totally up to you, where I say hello world. Now this is the title I want to output in my template. And before I hard-coded it in here, now with this template being under control of Vue.js, it's as simple as using this special syntax Vue.js will recognize with double curly braces, opening and closing, and in between I can simply write title. And Vue.js will automatically look into this data object. As I said, this is a reserved word. Look into this object, find the title property and output it here. If we now hit Control Enter in JSFiddle to see the result, we see hello world on the right because now we're outputting this title through Vue.js, which now controls this template. Now in the last lecture, we already created our first Vue application and got started with it. Now let's enhance it a little bit more before I then of course dive much deeper into it in the next course sections. So what I want to do right now though is I want to add an input field. I can do this by typing input and hitting tab, which will give me that in JS And now this input here, I want to allow the user to type something there and update my title depending on what the user enters. Well, I can do this by adding a command to this input field, an instruction Vue.js will recognize. This is called a directive. The directive I need is v-on, and this is, as I just said, a special command Vue.js will recognize. Keep in mind this whole part is under control of Vue.js. And then the thing this v-on command tells Vue.js is please listen to some event. Now which event? I pass this as an argument, and arguments are passed to directives by adding a colon and then the name of the argument. In this case, the name of the event I want to listen to. It's the input event, which is fired on every keystroke. And then I assign a value to this. And between the quotation marks, I would now write the code which I want to execute whenever this gets updated. So here, what I want to do is I want to call a method. And calling a method is very simple. I can simply call change title here. Now, of course, this method doesn't exist yet, so let's create it. Creating methods is simple. As with data, Vue.js also got a reserved property in the Vue instance, which is called methods. And no worries, you will learn about all these reserved property names and how they work throughout the course. Methods is again an object, and here we simply set up all the methods we want to use either in our template or from within our Vue instance. So here I named it change title up there, so let's name it change title here too. This is a function therefore, and now in this function I want to change my title. And here's the first important thing. I won't say data.title or something like that. Instead I can say this title equals. Now this, referring to the data object, certainly looks a bit strange. And it is strange. It's some magic being done in the background by Vue.js. It proxies all our data properties, like title, to the top Vue instance object automatically, which is why we can access it with this. I will come back to this later in the course, but for now it's just important to keep in mind you got access to all the properties stored in data and also to all the methods stored in methods by accessing them with this and then the name. So this title gives me access to the title stored here. And now I want to assign the value the user entered into the input. Well, thankfully, as with vanilla JavaScript, there is this event object being created automatically for me. This has nothing to do with Vue.js. This is vanilla JavaScript and how the DOM works. I get this event object, which, for example, also stores the target of the event, which of course will be this input field. Now this event object, which is created automatically by JavaScript, is passed to this method automatically by Vue.js. So I can fetch it because I know I will receive an argument and I'll name it event. This again is this default event object created by JavaScript. Now here I can simply say event. I know that this default object has a target property, and I know that the target will be the input field, of which I know it will have a value property holding the value the user entered. Well, and with this in place, that's all. If we now hit Control Enter again, we see this input, and if we type something there, we see that it updates our title. This is awesome, I'd say. This is our first Vue.js application, and we built it in like 8 minutes. Really awesome. So with that, let's see how you can work your way through this course, what this course has to offer, how you could set up the same example locally on your machine, before we then dive super deep into Vue.js in the next lectures. So we built our first application, and hopefully you saw how easy it is to get started with Vue.js. This is where we are at now in the course. We're getting started, but we'll leave this soon. And thereafter we start diving super deep into it, starting with how we can interact with the DOM, how we can output data, which different ways we have, how we can bind to HTML attributes, how we can listen to events, and much, much more. These are actually multiple modules in this course, and you will get a very first great impression or understanding of how Vue.js works. Well, thereafter it's time to deeply dive into the Vue instance, this core object each Vue application in the end, or widget, or whatever you're creating, uses. How does it work? Which life cycle does it follow? How can you use it to your advantage? Well, then it's time to leave JS Fiddle, which we'll use for the first sections, and really learn about how you could set up more professional workflows. We'll use the Vue CLI for that, but that really isn't a CLI doing all the work. It's just a CLI which provides you some easy to use and quickly to get started with templates, for example, then using Webpack in the end. We will talk in greater detail about this in this section, of course. With the more professional workflows set up, we can dive into components, a key concept of Vue.js. You build up your application from components. You can create reusable parts containing a template and business logic, which you then can use in different places in your app. Really powerful. And I will actually have multiple modules here about the basics, about how you can communicate between components, and some advanced concepts. Well, with all these core features being set, we will then have a look at forms. How can we handle user input? How can we use different form elements? And how can we create our own form control? Thereafter, we'll have a look at directives, filters, and mix-ins. What are all these things? How can they help you? How would you use them in your application? Well, we're getting really advanced here, and then we're going to have a look at animations and transitions. You want to make your application beautiful, and here we will learn how Vue.js makes that very easy, how it supports us animating dynamic content or the switching from one component to another. Well, with that, we're really diving super deep into it, but until now, we always stayed in our Vue.js application. What if we need to reach out to a server to store something in a database? Well, we can do that, and we will learn how we can access the HTTP from within a Vue.js application in this part of the course. Thereafter, time to have a look at what we would need to create bigger applications, namely single-page applications. For that, we will need routing, and of course I have a whole module dedicated to that, where you will learn how the router works, how to set it up, how to use child routes, how to pass parameters, and much more. That belongs in the world of single-page applications, and kind of like so does the state management we'll have a look at then. Managing the state in more complex applications can quickly become a problem, as you will see there, and I will also provide a solution, Vuex, a great additional package which makes this easy. That concludes the single-page application part, and we'll then have a look at deployment. How can we actually ship our application to a server? Does this sound great? To me, it does, and I can't wait to dive deeper into that. I'll do so soon. Let's next have a look at which resources this course gives you to make your progress, besides watching these videos, as easy as possible. Throughout this course, you get a lot of videos where I will explain all the concepts in detail. But sometimes you need a bit more than that. You don't only want to watch me code, you want to code yourself. Well, it's for that reason that we will build 4 projects throughout the course, practicing the different concepts we learned so they are scattered out throughout the course, and we will, well, finally conclude this course with building our final project, which is a complete single-page application in the end. But besides these projects, I also got a lot of quicker exercises mixed in. So little exercises where you practice single key concepts of that module the exercise is placed in. So together with the projects and the exercises, you should have a lot of coding challenges throughout the course, which allow you to practice the things you will see in the videos on your own. But besides that, of course, you can also find all the source code attached to the last lecture in each module. So if you want to have a look at the code we worked through in the video together, that is where you would go to see it in action. Well, and finally, there's always the Q&A section where you can and should ask questions if you're in doubt about something. Now, there are a lot of students and myself helping you there and replying to your questions. But always keep in mind, asking questions is great, but also consider answering the questions of other students. This really is how you'll learn the most, because you really have to challenge the things you learned and reiterate them in such a case. So I strongly recommend answering questions too. This will give you the most. Well, and with that, I'd say let's have a look at how we could set up this project locally if you don't want to use JS Fiddle in the first course modules here. And thereafter, time to get started and dive super deep into Vue.js.